Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and today I am desperate to talk to you about a Desolation called Peace, and I'll also talk about Memory Called Empire as well, because that never really got its due on this channel. I'll be honest, I'm probably going to talk more at you than to you, because this book, this series, just opens up the whatever neural pathway also is linked to drunk me, where I just get super fixated on tiny little things, and I become the most, obnoxious literary analysis person you could ever imagine. That's what this series does to me. I'm going to try and rein it in and not waffle too much, but I make no promises, and we'll see how we go. Thankfully, the lovely Angela, who will be linked below, obviously, took the brunt of that because we buddy read it together, and she basically was the recipient of many 6+ minute voice memos of me talking about how much I love this book. And she also sent me back 6+ minute voice memos, so kindred spirits where this series is concerned. So I guess the steel of my keenness has been blunted somewhat. But on with the review. Well, except before that we need to do the usual disclaimers. I was sent review copies of both of these books. These are both actually finished copies, but they were sent to me for review for free. But regardless of that, nobody's paying me to talk about books, and all opinions are my own. I am going to talk about both books in the series, and for the good of my sanity, I'm going to say there will probably be spoilers for Memory Called Empire. I'm going to keep it spoiler-free for Desolation Called Peace, but if you haven't already read Memory Called Empire and you do not want to be spoiled, click away now. Actually, wait. Pause this video, go and read Memory Called Empire, maybe go and read Desolation Called Peace, and then come back and watch this, and then let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Whatever you do, it's up to you, but don't come crying to me if I accidentally spoil book 1 for you. You've been warned. This is a adult science fiction series, the first book of which, A Memory Called Empire, won the Hugo for Best Novel? Yes. 2020 Hugo Award for Best Novel. I'm going to read from my notes for this bit. Arkady Martin has an MST in Classical Armenian Studies and a PhD in Medieval Byzantine, Global and Comparative History, and she's also been writing since 2012, but A Memory Called Empire was her first novel, which is madness to me. Plot summary. I'm going to assume that you know the plot to book 1, but let's remind ourselves. Mahit replaces the ambassador from Lascelles Station to the planet Texiclan, only to discover that her predecessor, not only was he involved in some rather shady political stuff, but has also become part of a larger political gubbins. So book 1 ties off fairly neatly with Mahit heading back to Lascelles Station to sort of work out what's going on with her and the fact that the memory line that she's meant to have has been somewhat tampered with, and also to confront a bit of what's been going on because there's some shady stuff happening at home as well. Book 2 begins and Texiclan is facing an unknown entity, these strange alien creatures that seem to lurk in the darkness, appear out of nowhere and destroy their ships, and with whom they cannot communicate. Who's good at communication? Why, it might just be some of the characters from book 1. So they now not only need to deal with the fallout of book 1 and all the emotional and, political baggage that came with that, but also try and prevent war. I'm doing those plot summaries a total disservice, and I've missed out so many really important details. But honestly, you try and do a succinct summary of this book series without completely spoiling everything and also conveying enough of the key points. Now my notes go a little bit slimmer because I thought I wanted to do this more off the cuff. That may have not been the best choice. One of the things I love about this whole series, but in particular in book 2, is the themes of empire, the themes of identity, the themes of belonging and cultural erasure, and what is and isn't a barbarian are really important. And what I love about this series is that book 1 sets up a lot of the work that then is really expanded upon in book 2. So in book 1 we have a lot of discussion between the characters Three Seagrass and Mahit. So what's the understanding of the individual and the collective in your culture? And it's very different for these two women. And what I really enjoy is that this second book kind of says, but what if I bring in a whole other perspective that will make you realise how similar your perspectives actually are, or will highlight the biggest differences and which differences matter to you. And I think it's similar with a lot of the other themes of the book, the way that this story says everything you thought you knew, you still know, and it's not going to be washed away. It's not a problem that we're not going to deal with, but we're going to present you with a larger issue and we'll see what comes out of it. And we're going to present you with a different angle on this. A lot of the stuff to do with language is really important in this story because of this need to communicate with this other entity. I really enjoyed the exploration of that and how the different skills of the different characters really came into play. So the ambassador nature of characters is really important. How much does that impact when you're dealing with someone you can't even guess at the body language of, for example? It just does exactly what I wanted to do, which is say, you know that idea I had? I've made it so much bigger. I really like the tone of these books. The writing is absolutely stunning. The use of imagery is really powerful, and I'll be very interested. I haven't watched Angela's review yet. I am planning on doing so, but I didn't want to just do a video that was either reiterating her points or just saying Angela says this better than I do. I'm sure she does, but it was really interesting reading that because we both visualise things in very different ways, but quite often we'd be picking out the similar points. And I think it's the strength of metaphor used quite often. A lot of things used to describe other things, and it helps you really paint a picture. A lot of the characters, you get a really good sense of what they look like, which isn't something that I typically have. So I really, really enjoyed that. And I think in a more space-based setting, because primarily we're in space, there's one perspective that's still planet-side, I think that you get a lot less opportunity to describe kind of topography and world. Everything's a bit stale and sterile in space, so the description you do get is really important to help you differentiate things, and I just thought it was really well done. I think particularly my favourite points were the description of Lascelles Station, both from Mahit's perspective and another character's perspective, and I think that their different viewpoints on that were really interesting, especially since that's a setting we didn't get to see in book one. I did want to touch on the pace a little bit. I read both of these, I think, originally in a digital format and only read them physically when I had review copies, I think, possibly. Either way, definitely Desolation called Peace. And the thing that really sticks with me is these feel like very long chapters. The books don't actually look that long when you hold them physically, but certainly reading them digitally, it feels like not a slog to get to the end of a chapter, but you notice that it's longer than you're expecting it to be. And I think that's something to bear in mind, both for setting up your expectation, but also if you're the kind of person who goes, oh, I'm just going to quickly read a chapter in the 5 minutes I've got. You need about 20 minutes for a chapter, at least, because it bounces perspectives within that chapter. I think the pace actually is really well handled. It could get very dragging at times, I think, were it not for that shift in perspective. If you were reading a 20-minute chapter from one person, it could get quite annoying. And I like that the book mixes it up with interludes that let you see a different perspective for just a moment and maybe learn something a little bit new. There's dramatic irony, there's loads of it, which is one of my favourite things, which I think also helps keep the pace up because you're waiting for characters to find out information that you know. All in all, I think the craft of this series is spectacular, and I think that's part of why it won awards, is that it is extremely well put together as a series and as a book. I've written in my notes long but not too long, and I think that again really sums it up. It feels like just the right amount of information is given and the right amount of time is spent before and after major events within the story, so you get a lot of space to breathe, but not so much that you get totally bored. Another thing that really surprised me about this book is I had absolutely no idea where the sequel was going. I didn't really know where it was going to start. Most of our voice memos are us predicting where things are going to go, and maybe this is going to have a big significance. Is the fact that there are cats in space going to be a reference later, and all of this stuff, and I really liked that there were so many different places this book could go, and honestly, I think probably about 10% of our guesses were correct. So it's tropey enough that you can predict things happening, but also fresh and new, and a combination of those tropes in such a way that the book feels completely fresh, and that's great. I definitely think that if you are planning on reading A Desolation Called Peace, read A Memory Called Empire again first. Not necessarily because there's a huge amount of continuation between the two. There's a significant portion, you could probably pick it up, but I think that the themes are so important, and to really carry those themes from the start of book one all the way to the end of book two will give you a better reading experience. Even though I have read significantly more sci-fi since I first read Memory Called Empire, I still find it really hard to recommend things, so I'm just going to give you my smattering of ideas. Unconquerable Sun by Kate Elliott is another fun. It's very much more of an action-packed adventure-y kind of book, but has a lot of similar kind of cultural ideas within it. Piranesi by Susanna Clarke has a similar kind of essence of discovery to it, which I enjoy. And the other one is just a recent sci-fi read that I really enjoyed that I have a review for, but that's Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. I just think that's a good book and I like to recommend it to people. Final thoughts. Should you read this series, these books? Is book two worth it? Absolutely yes to all of these things. I think this is a really, really great series. I think it has a lot of crossover appeal. I think that it's worth taking your time to read, most definitely. It's worth giving yourself the space to read a bit of it and put it down and come back to it later. And it's worth finding a friend who'll read it with you. I think I would have had a much much less enjoyable. I wouldn't say it wouldn't have been fun, but a much less enjoyable reading experience if I hadn't read it with Angela and had somebody who I could go, oh yes, let's talk about all the things with. I think this would make a really good series for a book club to go into for that reason, but also just if you have a friend. And if you don't have a friend, I'll be your friend. Message me your thoughts on these books, please and thank you. Have you already read either of these? Are you planning on it? I think my schedule, I'm hoping I can get this video out on the day that Desolation Called Peace comes out. So if you're here on that day, welcome. And I hope you're excited about this book release. Basically, comment anything you want in the comments below. I'll be interested to hear it. Hopefully, at least slightly relevant to this, but you know, I'm not too fussed. While you're down there commenting, you can also follow me on my social media, subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. There's more great books coming out this year that I'm hoping to review, maybe with slightly more in-depth notes than I've given myself for this one. Maybe not. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. Belonging and cultural erasure. I can never say it. Kind of, have I talked about pacing later? I have. Because everything's a little bit more stale and sterile. Who's beeping? Somebody's beeping. It's all fine.